You are watching the Manjaro Beginners Tour, and specifically, we are looking at the Manjaro Settings Manager right now on Spatry's Cup of Linux. And here we are, right about the halfway point in our series, and today we are looking at the Manjaro Settings Manager. Before we get started, I would like to direct your attention to the link in the description. Clicking on this will take you to the Cup of Linux website, where you will get the show notes for all of the videos in this series. We have a video index available to you, articles of interest, and in my last episode I mentioned that I would make the borderless window theme for XFCE available for download. This will be shipping, of course, with the next release of Manjaro Cup of Linux Edition that I'm working on right now as I'm building this series. Among the links of interest that are available here, one of them takes you to the Manjaro Wiki. And this online tome has everything you need to know about setting up your system. And the items that we're going to be focusing on in this section are under Manjaro hardware detection. But I also want to bring up a point about the printers. Okay, I have gone completely paperless, so I don't use a printer myself, but we do have a printer in the household. So this document tells you about enabling printing in Manjaro because it's not enabled by default. It's a few simple, short steps that you will follow here. And then there's the printer configuration page, and this area has a lot of pictures and explains everything in great detail with setting up your printer. The only thing I can advise, I get people ask me all the time, "Hey Spat, can I use this brand of printer?" I have no idea. As a matter of fact, when we just got our Canon printer, I went online first, and I researched the model, and basically had a look to see what other people had to say about it, and pretty much people were saying, okay, this model that I was looking at in the store does run on Linux, so I went ahead and bought it. So basically this day and age, you know, as more and more people start adopting Linux, maybe we'll start seeing more printers get driver support. But in the event you do have a printer that just does not have a driver, one workaround that I have done, and this has worked for me personally, is to basically expose those USB ports in a virtual machine, and then have a Windows installation within the virtual machine, and the driver software working that way, and I've been able to get printers to, you know, I know it's, I realize it's not the best method, but if it's the only way I could get something working, you know, it's what you gotta do sometimes, so, yeah. Alright, finally, we need to talk about the Manjaro hardware detection tool, and I'm gonna show this in use in both my virtual setup that I have right now, that we've been working in, but I'm also going to do it on my own desktop because I have some things that I want to explain. But it would be in your best interest to read through this, because this does cover kernels, it covers configuring your graphics card, and this one has some commands that you can run for automatic configuration of your graphic card, where it will attempt to detect and install a free or a non-free driver depending on your preference. Or it can give you instructions on configuring NVIDIA. I don't use NVIDIA, so I really can't support it. You're going to have to read the guide here to get detailed information on that. I use Catalyst myself, and pretty much it works very well for my Catalyst card, but the thing is, some other people have mentioned they're having difficulty with the latest Catalyst cards, and again, this is where, you know, sometimes Manjaro's driver stacks may not work with brand spanking new hardware, in which case you're probably going to need to pull up the Arch Wiki here, and you're going to need to go on that page and follow their instructions for manually installing a new driver that can possibly support your device. So, and that could be a scenario for you. But the nice thing about the Arch Wiki is they are very detailed, they give clear instructions, and they take you step by step through everything you need to know. And I gotta tell you, the Arch Wiki is just a terrific learning experience. And if you really want to learn what makes Linux tick, I suggest following the Arch Wiki and building Arch the Arch way. It will give you a sense of appreciation for what Manjaro has to offer. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and log into our machine that we've been working in. And you're going to notice I've made a few changes to the layout as compared to the last episode. As I am working on this series, I am also configuring this desktop to be the next MCOL release. And this is nowhere near close to what it's going to look like. I don't want you guys to get confused. We're still working with Manjaro here. Basically, we're going to go to the Settings button. And I realize it's not the same exact icons we had last time, but the button's in the same place. And then we are going to go into the Manjaro Settings Manager. And of course, this one wants your password. The first stop on our tour is Language. Okay, and basically this is where you're going to define the system locales that you have on your system. In my case, I speak English and I live in the United States. So these are selected here. Okay, and then you have detailed settings for these, such as display language, formats. You can also define your measurement units and that sort of thing. The next stop on our tour is the language packs. And when you have language packs available, your system tray is going to give you a notification letting you know that these items are available. So if you have Thunderbird, A-Spell, looks like the GIMP, Hunspell, which I think is a spelling engine, and then -en, whatever that is, these are other language packs. And then, of course, this gives you a listing of any additional language packs which are installed. At this point, we don't have any installed, so we are going to go ahead and apply it. You can see here that the GUI is just basically grabbing and downloading these packages rather than you having to open up a terminal and download these. The next item we have is the kernel. Let's talk about this. Okay, using the GUI, and when this booted up the first time after loading up everything, it had let me know that the newest recommended LTS is 4.4.6. I have that running and installed. And from here, I can take any other kernel that I have installed. What shipped with this was 4.1.21, which is also an LTS kernel. I can remove that if I wish. And just by clicking this button, it will remove the kernel and the associated packages which go with it. The oldest LTS kernel at the time of this filming is Linux 3.10. All right, let's say I want to install this. If I press the install button, it's going to want to not only install the kernel, but it's also going to install other things that I have with it. All right, now, rather than just showing you the GUI way of doing this, I would like to show you how to do this in the terminal because it's really not that hard. It's sudo mhwd tech kernel -i Linux 3.10. It asks for your password. It synchronizes the databases, and then it gives you a listing of what it wants to install. And as you can see, it's going to install Linux 3.1.10. It's going to install Linux 3.10 Endis wrapper. And then it's also going to install Linux 3.10 VirtualBox guest modules. Now, if I had the Catalyst drivers installed, it would also download a display driver with it as well. If I had the Broadcom card that I have installed on this thing visible to the virtual machine that we're running in, it would download that as well. I am not going to install this because I have 2 kernels available, but I want to show you how you would select different kernels. Let's go ahead and restart the machine. You can see here at the grub prompt, you have regular Manjaro Linux, and then you have advanced options for Manjaro Linux. If you hit this here, you can choose which kernel you want to boot your system with. I never use any of these fallbacks here. I'm either going to use the 4.1 here, or I'm going to use 4.6. Alright, and one of these older kernels may come in handy, especially if you use VMware, and the VMware patch doesn't build against the newest kernels. You need to use one of the older ones with it. Matter of fact, that's what I've used Linux 3.10 for. Now, I haven't used VMware in a while, so maybe they've probably patched that by now. I hope they did if I ever decide to use VMware again. But that could be one instance where you would want to use a different kernel than what is currently up to date. Additionally, someone had mentioned that they're having a problem with one of their network cards. It works under Linux kernel 4.1, but it just doesn't seem to want to work under a newer kernel. Now, somebody correct me if I'm wrong about this, but it's my understanding that sometimes newer kernels will drop support for legacy hardware. And in a case such as this with a Wi-Fi or with an Ethernet card, using the Endis wrapper may be a solution for you. So I imagine that's why the Manjaro team includes Endis wrapper in with the kernel. And it's built against the kernel packages, so when we got these going. So at any rate, I digress too much here. Let's just continue here. And while this is booting up, I'll make a demonstration on my desktop here. So if I go sudo mhwd tac kernel tac l, it's giving me a listing of all the available kernels. Now this isn't elegant and pretty like the other listing that we have when we open up the Manjaro settings manager. So maybe using the GUI is a little bit more preferable. But in the instance where, let's say, I want Linux 3.1.0, I'm going to say sudo mhwd tac kernel -i for install Linux 3.1.0. After the synchronization of databases, look at all of these things in this stack that it wants to grab. It wants to grab Linux 3.10. It wants to grab the Broadcom. And believe it or not, I actually, I've I actually use I've actually used the NDIS wrapper with this, although I think Broadcom's working now. But it's good that they keep NDIS wrapper in here, because if there's ever an issue, I can open up the NDIS wrapper and get it to work with my Wi-Fi. You'll notice the Catalyst driver, because I use AMD/ATI. It's also given me the headers because, well, I build things from either using the AUR, building with Make Package, or using a helper like Yowert. Okay, looks like I have the OpenVM tools as well, VirtualBox guest modules, and other modules here. So that's what I'm talking about by their stacks, and I'm no expert on this at all. But I think it's really cool that when you are installing a kernel, you get all of these added features installing with it. So it seems like, you know, you've got stuff that's built to work with that present kernel. So that's cool indeed. I'm not going to install this. I just wanted to show this to you. At the end of the day, I think this kernel application is a lot neater than just using the terminal version. You can clearly see what's experimental. This is a standard kernel here. LTS means long-term support, and ESS stands for extended service support. And I just like how this looks. It looks pretty neat. Also, it gives you an option to view the change logs on these. So you can experiment around with them anyway. So this is a nice little interface, and I'm glad that the Manjaro team makes this available, because using the MHWD kernel, as I showed you in the terminal, yeah, that can be confusing for some. The next item on the tour is user accounts. I like this one. Very simple, very easy to set up. Press the plus button, type in a username, type in a password, create. All right. And then you have a new user account. You don't believe me? Let me show you. There's Spanky. And as you can see, a default layout has been set up. And now I have a nice little shiny new user account for Spanky. How cool is that? Let's log out of this. Back to the Spatry side of things, and let's go back into user accounts, and let's go ahead and delete Spanky. Note to self, you are not going to delete this account if they have any processes that are actively running. So you might want to reboot the computer, or just using a program like HTOP or something, close any processes that Spanky is using before you highlight and select, then press the X button to remove Spanky and to remove his folder. All right, and then now there's just me. I love how they made that super easy to configure. The next stop on the tour is time and date, and this one is extremely complicated to do. You can have it set the time and date automatically. Okay, why don't we do that? And what it will do is it will just poll the time online. It'll automatically change it, so you can set that up. You can configure your time zone. I'm in America, New York. But you have some options here. You can set the hardware clock in local time if you want to. So you can use this however you want to, pretty much. If you're, for instance, this is interesting here. Let's say you live in Nevada, they don't have daylight savings time. So you would uncheck that. You're one of the lucky people that don't have to, your time zone doesn't change, during the solstice and equinoxes or whenever that is. Whatever that correct terminology is. So you could actually uncheck that one because your time doesn't change. You're special, But at any rate, you have these options. Is it daylight savings time? Does it have transitions? That sort of thing. So pretty much that's your clock. Happy, happy, joy, joy. Next, let's talk about notifications. This is something everybody loves to disable on their system. Well, just me. I don't like those annoying little pop-up messages, those spammy little notify messages. But in MCOL, in the next release, I gotta have the pop-up messages because there are people that are probably gonna want them. But I'm sure I'll have a nice little quick fix and a nice little tutorial that I'll put up once this distro releases, telling people how to disable them immediately so that you are not spammed by those messages ever again. Kernel notifications. This could be handy, though. If you want to be alerted when the next LTS kernel comes out, and I noticed that when I had done these installations. So this is a nice new feature that they have brought, that the Manjaro team has brought to the table. You can check for new kernels. If you only want notifications about LTS kernels, you can select that, or only notify about recommended kernels. That's a good option too. Also, you can have it check for missing language packs. So in the notification settings here, if you don't want to be notified about these at all, you can just uncheck everything and wash your hands of the entire matter. Next, let's go into the hardware section and talk about keyboard settings. And basically, you did this when you did your fresh install of Manjaro. It had already detected your keyboard, but let's say, you buy a new keyboard and maybe it has a different character map on it. Well, from here, you can manually go in and you can change this. So if it's not a 105 key keyboard, it's a 102 key or some other wonky kind of setup, you can fix that here if you want to. Now let's talk about hardware detection. This is a very nice tool that the Manjaro team has set up to make this relatively easy for people to set up their graphics. Now, obviously, I'm running this in a virtual machine, and basically it's showing that I'm running, VirtualBox drivers. Okay, and they actually already had the driver installed in this. I didn't even have to set this up, and I love the Manjaro team for actually doing that. It's already set up, so I don't have to worry about it, and it's a great time saver, and I wish more distribution developers would do this. So why don't we close this distro here, and let's have a look at it on the other side of things. Okay, now we are on my desktop, and you're going to see that the Manjaro hardware detection tool looks a bit different here because it's showing that I have proprietary drivers. And believe it or not, I never even used the graphical driver for setting up all of these things. I did everything from the command line. And I'm going to show you those commands, but I'm not necessarily going to run them because I got the system working the way I want and I don't want to mess things up. But I will show you where those commands are in the guide here in a moment. But as you can see here, you've got two options on these big buttons. You can auto-install the open source driver, or you can auto-install proprietary drivers, okay? And you can see here, I have the Beaver Creek Radeon driver for my graphics card installed, and it's showing that I have the proprietary version because open source isn't checked. I also have video ATI drivers showing open source and proprietary, but I know that it's using the I know that it's using the Catalyst Control Center because when I go in and mess with things, I know it's using the right thing here. Okay, and then of course it's also showing that I need a driver for my Broadcom, and Broadcom is the biggest pain in the neck. One of those things I kind of wish Linus Torvalds had given the finger to the Broadcom company as well, because their drivers are absolutely terrible. And there was one point where I actually had to use Indus Wrapper, which where I supplied a Windows driver for the network card just to get Wi-Fi working here. So, yeah. Happy, joy on that level. But at least we got all of that working. But let's go ahead and have a look at how we do that. Really, the easiest method for installing is running sudo mhwd tac a to auto-install a PCI driver, non-free for proprietary, or you would change this word to free, and then 0300 for the graphics. Right, and usually, and I've posted that command on my forum more times than I can count. Okay, and actually, this would work even for the NVIDIA driver. But some of you guys out there may have some strange configurations like the hybrid cards and that sort of thing. So you've got not only, it's like a hybrid, half Intel and half Catalyst, or half Intel, half NVIDIA, or whatever. For cards such as that, this guide right here is going to be your friend for setting these up. Because sometimes especially if you're using a brand new video card, you may just have to compile the drivers yourself. And unfortunately, it is a fact of life, and at least until, the drivers, catch up and, the developers can get these ported over to Manjaro. And I do realize there are some people who have problems with the way Manjaro stacks drivers, because I've had some people tell me, hey, Spat, gosh, I can get all this working if I install Arch the Arch way, but for some reason, this isn't working in Manjaro, and I can't figure out why. And to be honest with you, I don't have the troubleshooting frame of mind to actually dig in that deep and try and figure out why a piece of hardware that I'm not even using is why it's working or why it's not working. So at the end of the day, if you are having a hard time getting the Manjaro hardware detection tool to properly set up any of your drivers on your computer, the Arch Wiki is the way to go. Search for the item that it is that you have that you're trying to get working. Such as, we already looked at NVIDIA. If you're having problems with Broadcom, look it up. See what they have in there. Oh, look, they've got a whole section on Broadcom wireless and some things that you can do to get this working. And yes, I've read this guide too. And let me tell you what, kids, helpful. The best documentation out there. And then, of course, Catalyst. Using the AMD Catalyst graphics, everything you could want to know about running Catalyst on an Arch-based system is located here, and everything is defined in excellent detail. So, I highly recommend that you make good use of this documentation here. There are times I find myself when I'm bored, and I have nothing better to do. I'll actually just pull up a page in Arch Linux here and just sit down and read it. Just for my own information, just so I can learn something new. And sometimes I'll be able to retain that knowledge, and other times, well, not so much. But it's all good. That is all I have on the Manjaro Settings Manager. The Manjaro team has put in a great amount of effort here to make a number of tools available to end users to make it easy for them to set up everyday things such as their languages on the computer, kernels, user accounts, notifications, and of course, setting up proprietary hardware. I love their hardware detection tool. I think it's really cool. Unfortunately, it doesn't work with everything out there, and in cases such as that, that's where the documentation comes in handy, and I really like the effort that has gone into the Manjaro and the Arch wikis for helping people to get their hardware and that sort of thing set up. So, good stuff indeed. My next video, we're going to talk about package management, and we are not only going to do it from the GUI using PAMAC, I'm also going to show you how to use Pacman from the terminal. That's coming next, and until then, peace out!